Hi, welcome back to Creative Magic Club. And this week's episode is actually going to be a solo show with me, my first one ever, which I've been meaning to do for a while, but obviously I've been resisting it because me talking about my personal life is not as easy for me as having really fun chats with other amazing entrepreneurs. And this wasn't originally the first solo show that I had planned, but I had the intuitive nudge to talk about my ayahuasca experience because more and more people have been asking me about it. And it's a really cool story. And the more I reflect on it, the more I realize that it's actually really was one of those very pivotal turning points for me that kind of birthed everything that I'm doing now today. So pull up a chair, get comfortable, grab a cup of tea for story time with Sarah, because we're going to go really deep into this very personal story about my life and enjoy, take what you need from it. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Just go and post them in the comments on my this video on my YouTube channel, which you can find through my website on withsarahmac.com. Because it's one of those things that more and more people are talking about before. And I did it, I think it was 2016. And it's one of those practices that's, has been very under the radar and has been getting more and more attention, and more people have been finding ways to do it. And it's a very magical experience that's very, very different from person to person. So I wanted to share my experience with you. And yes, I help people with their businesses, with their copy, content strategy, social media strategy, programs, pricing, all of that stuff, organization, energy management. But what I also do underneath that is the energy that you're embodying behind it all. And which is obviously the mindset part and the energetics. And this is really what this conversation is about. What are you holding to be true? What are you connected to within yourself that is guiding your creativity and your inspiration and your action taking in whatever it is that you're creating in your life, whether that's your business, your relationships, your creative projects, anything that you are excited to turn your time and energy to. The more deeply we understand who we are at the core, the more we connect with that on a consistent basis, the more power, the more impact, and the more alignment everything starts to flow with. So this really connects to that conversation. And this is something that really helped me to gain a deeper understanding of myself and who I am and what's going on in the magical, mystical inner world of my deepest corners of myself and my spirituality. So this is the really deeply energetic and spiritual side of the work of creation in business, in life, in all the areas. So ayahuasca is a plant medicine, and it's taken from a herb that was originally grown in Peru, I believe, but they also now grow it in Hawaii. And it's taken in liquid form in ceremonies. And it basically takes you on a very, very, very intense experience that you have to prepare your body for physically, dietary wise. There are certain things to eliminate from your diet. And there's some fasting before to prepare yourself, because essentially it's a big purging. It's a big release. It's kind of a big internal clear out. And you can have all different types of experiences, whether that's nothing at all, maybe that's just feeling a little bit weird, or whether that's really going off the deep end and having very intense, like hallucinogenic visual journeys and experiences that can last for very many hours at a time. So in 2016, which is when I took it, I believe, how it came about for me is it started coming up in conversation a lot. I heard it. I heard people talking about it. I met people who had done it, who started mentioning it. And I just noticed it started coming up in conversation with more frequency. And whenever that happens, I always pay attention and get curious. And I'm like, what is it here for me in this thing that keeps coming up for me? And then, the stars just aligned. I was traveling, and a friend put me in touch with some shamans that she really trusted that had, came with very highly recommended, and an opportunity came up to attend a ceremony, and it just aligned really perfectly with my travel plans. It really came to me. I didn't go seeking it out. And I always trust when something flows very naturally in that way, that it's very aligned for me, and there's something good there for me. So I really trusted that. I got on a ferry, went to a little island in a location that I shall not name, because there are still some funny rules about these ceremonies at the moment. And I was in a moment where I'd recently finished my degree. I'd started out as an entrepreneur. I'd left behind my career in the film industry. And I was really in that middle point of my burnout where I was actively working to recover my health, recover my energy, ask really deep questions about why I had ended up in that state in the first place, really starting to listen to myself more deeply and ask powerful questions about, what was going to be a better direction for me? Where was I being called? Because a lot of things were falling away. A lot of things were falling apart, like my career choices. I was trying to figure out how to get to the US to be with my honey. And I was obviously like building this new path as an entrepreneur. And so I was dealing with a lot of my money stuff. I was doing the money mindset work around actually like charging my worth, being able to create the money that I wanted for the level of freedom that I wanted to be able to experience. I'd already created that location independence and the ability to travel by working as a digital nomad on my laptop online. But there was still like real health issues, like managing my energy was just something that was challenging for me on a daily basis. I had depression. I had trouble focusing. I had anxiety. I wasn't really like, that aware of like what was really going on. I really just knew I don't feel good. Things need to change. I need to shift. And I was asking lots of questions and I was searching everywhere for answers. So here's the thing about any type of anything, actually, I have found that you embark on in life, whether that's work with a practitioner, whether that's a ceremony, whether that's taking a new supplement, whether that's signing up for a new course, whether that's launching a new program, it's all about the intention, having a very clear and focused and powerful intention. And that's always going to dictate your experience and how that's going to unfold for you. And my clear intention for day one, I did 2 days of ceremonies. My intention for day one was just to release, because I knew that this was a purging ritual. I knew that there was, I'd already gained that understanding that a lot of my fatigue, a lot of my burnout, a lot of the confusion and the depression had come as a result of me holding on to emotions in my body that I just hadn't processed. I hadn't released. I hadn't had the tools or the support to be able to understand, to release. And that much I knew. So that was my very clear intention for day one, which was to just release whatever it is that's standing in the way of me feeling better. And that night, I was the annoying person in the ceremony that was making noise all night long. It's, you come and you start the ceremony about 9 and then it goes throughout the night. I was literally crying the entire time. I had this visualization of a hand kind of coming in and it was almost like pulling out a plug or a stopper. It was a little pyramid shape and it was like kind of in this like expansive universe. That was the only visual I had that night. It was like the release, like the opening up. And I just felt like I was crying. I was crying for myself. I was crying for all the pain that I had felt or that I hadn't felt. And then I just kept crying and crying and crying. And it felt like I was crying for everybody in my family. It felt like I was crying for all the suffering of previous generations in my family. It felt in the end that I was crying for humanity, for all of the pain, for all of the suffering. And I didn't know specifically for what. I just felt really connected to pain and releasing a lot of pain from my body. And, it was kind of a peaceful and obviously very cathartic experience at the same time as just being also extremely intense. And at the same time, my body was releasing a lot, as it does in these ceremonies, which is through both ends. Yeah, like you bring a puke bucket to the ayahuasca ceremony. So physically, it was obviously also extremely uncomfortable. But the shamans that I did it with held a really, really safe and supportive space. And hopefully I didn't interrupt the other people who were doing the ceremony too much. And that was really my entire experience for the first night. So I knew I'd done good work. I knew obviously massive shifts were going to come from that. And then when I came back for day 2, the shamans were like, oh, don't worry, like, you had a rough night last night, like, you're not going to have a rough night again, like, it just doesn't happen. Of course, I had a very intense experience as well. On day 2, I don't exactly remember what my intention was for that ceremony, but I had a lot more interesting and varied visual experiences in that night. And then I had another like very clear, very specific, very unique energetic experience, which began with kind of connecting to almost these blue figures that felt really, really high up in the stratosphere. Like, it was this very high level energy. And for me at that time, I interpreted as like, I felt like I had just made contact with aliens. Like, it felt like it was beyond this world, like it was beyond something that I had experienced. And it felt very, very intense. And then the analogy that comes to mind when I describe how this experience was for me physically was kind of like, imagine you have a very high frequency sound and then you're trying to put it through like an old analog speaker. That's exactly what it felt like to me. And there was a lot of intense physical sensations, like a lot of heavy breathing, kind of like either when you're about to puke or you're about to have an orgasm, where there's just that heavy breathing that's processing the movement of a lot of energy through the body. And then my body became very, very heavy and felt like it was like literally being sucked into the ground. And while these frequencies were what felt like were being channeled through my body, and then eventually that started to come out of my mouth, and I started like making these sounds kind of as a way to just, I wasn't controlling this, but that's what was just happening with the movement of this energy through my body. And again, the most disruptive person in the room on that ceremony. Apologies to everybody who was there. And so yeah, that was the experience, the very physical kind of experiential part of my journey in that evening. And then that went on to another vision, which where I saw myself standing in the street in Montreal with a microphone with like giant speakers. So, and then there was this other whole thing of, I don't remember all of it. There was another part which felt like I was kind of like receiving my first child, like to give birth to the spirit of my first child. And there was many other things too that I don't fully recall. But I remember what happened in talking about this with a friend of mine who was there afterwards was, getting that interpretation, that kind of sensation of feeling like I was like making connection with a child or the spirit of a child was, it was a moment of rebirth. Like, that was a moment of rebirth for me, for a new chapter in my identity, or a new level of consciousness, or a new just understanding or connection to myself and the expression of myself in this lifetime. And another reason why I wanted to share this was because I noticed I was sharing this with a friend recently, and in the retelling of it, I received more insights. And that's just, obviously the way when you speak and when you process these types of experiences, these types of often very intangible internal experiences, then that perspective and that objectivity can bring so much more insight and, pieces of clarity that drop in later. And I really connected to this, these metaphors that came through in the visualizations as really representing what I'm doing now in my work on multiple levels, which is essentially being the channel. Like, that's the way I would describe how I function, how I create in this world, and how I am of service to others and in support of others through my business and through my work. And it's really this idea of, being an open channel for stories, for energy, for vibration, for sound, for music, for programs, for business offerings, for, as a coach. And one thing I've really noticed as a coach and, facilitator of transformation in others is just by being in that space, just by being really present, we get to co-create and we get to create insights and things come through. Like, I am an open channel. Every time before I sit down with my clients, I take a deep breath, I become present, I become centered, and I set the very clear intention to get out of my own way, get out of my head, and to just be an open channel for whatever it is that's going to support this person in their highest good today for this session. And it always comes through, right? Like, that intention creates the space for whatever that person needs, and to be very unattached to it. And it's so important to remember this piece of the conversation when whether we're doing business, whether we're focusing on making money, whether we're focusing on, social media marketing, creating content, sharing our stories, is that intuitive guidance that creates alignment, that creates the impact that we are the most well positioned to make, will come through when we set that clear intention. And often the times when it feels difficult, or it feels very complicated, or it feels like it's not working, that always comes as a result of really being in our head, trying to control everything and not getting out of our own way. And that's really the skill that I have been honing and fine-tuning and embodying, and really just expressing through all of the different modalities that I'm currently working in, whether that is creating content for my marketing, whether that is in a coaching call, whether that is writing songs or singing or making music, is to be the channel for whatever message wants to come through, whatever vibration wants to come through, whatever energy or frequency is kind of holding the information that will allow us to take the action, to step into more alignment, to be delivering the impact that we're feeling called to make, to deliver the message that we're feeling inspired to share. And obviously, having been fine-tuning that process over the years, being able to just really identify with and understand that it's so much easier when we channel from presence and from flow, versus trying to micromanage and plan everything and create everything from our mental perspective, which is really just a collection of stories of the past. So we're wanting to evolve. We're wanting to create things that we've never created before. We're wanting to access more wealth and more abundance with more ease, with more joy, with more freedom. That comes from being in that process of trust, really being a channel for whatever wants to come through in the moment. And that's why when I create, I show up and I create in the moment and I share for that moment. I don't really do things very far in advance. And, maybe that's something that will change. I'm not saying there's a right or a wrong way to do things, but that is something that has worked really well for me and allowed me to really live in a state of flow and inspiration, and that's been the practice, to be able to be present with what feels inspired to come through me. What do I feel inspired to talk about? What am I intuitively feeling very guided to share? Whether that's in content, whether that's in a session with my clients, whether that's through some other form of creativity. So, and that's really what I support my clients with too. And that's kind of self-trust, right? Like, trusting that we always have access to whatever it is that we need in every single moment if we open up to it, and to trust that our message is enough, and what we have within us right now is enough, and it's all that we need. We don't need to become experts in something else. Like, we don't need to take millions of certifications, or, and not that there's anything wrong in training and gathering more tools, but when that's coming from a mindset of, I'm not ready yet now, I'm not confident yet now, that's just a shift that we get to make that allows us to make so much more impact and allows us to access so much more ease right now in the present moment and every moment forward. So that's really what I want you to take from this message, is that you have that capacity, right? Like if you're drawn to this work, if you're drawn to this conversation, then to just fine tune your ability as an open channel to be able to receive whatever is coming in terms of inspiration, to put it out, to translate that into action, and to trust that that is like, that's your job, right? And then everything unfolds and everything magnetizes to you from that place, because when you're really in alignment and when people really get to connect to you for who you are as a unique individual, it's so easy. You don't have to convince, you don't have to overcomplicate things. And your story and who you are and your energy and everything that you're embodying, all the wisdom that you embody now today from everything that you've done every day up until now, like that's enough for you to be able to work with. That's enough for you to be able to make an impact. That's enough for you to be able to realize the things that you desire and bring your desires to life. Whether that's money, being a channel for abundance and money, opportunity and impact, whether that's creativity, whether that's health and vitality and energy, and happiness in all of the areas that you're doing. So after my trip, so yeah, I would say that would be the main nugget of wisdom is really that self-trust. To trust and to trust whatever it is I'm feeling desired. I feel a desire to do and I'm feeling pulled towards, and to trust whatever intuitively comes up for me, that is a value, and that when I share that, everybody benefits and good things happen. So that was like the key takeaway from that experience, that in stepping into and fully embodying that, that's how my business has evolved. That's how my creative practice has evolved. And I've just been able to have so much more fun and freedom. And it really brought me back into alignment energetically, so that I got my energy back, the fatigue went away. Like long periods of depression became a thing of the past for me. And that was, obviously a lot has come up since then. And that was really, one of the key points in the evolution of where I am today. And I did definitely experience a lot of depression after the ceremonies. And I've noticed that is just when emotion is coming up, when it's coming up to be released, when I allow it to release, when I give it that space, when I feel it, then it gets to leave. And I'm no longer holding it. And that's obviously been an ongoing process. And, a lot of the puzzle pieces have emerged for me in terms of memories around trauma that I experienced, that I had been holding, that had been creating that fatigue and that sickness and all of those symptoms that I've been able to manage and, build the tools and the processes to be able to move through and come back every time that's happened for me. Every time something comes up and I give it the space to release and to move through me, there's like a shed load of energy available to me on the other side of that. There's more presence, there's more peace, there's more calm. And so it definitely was a very powerful medicine for me to be able to experience at that point in my journey. Yes, it was very intense. Yes, it was a big investment. Yes, I was working through stuff for weeks and weeks after that did not feel good, and that took me a while to get back into a balance again, because it's really it's like going through to a spiritual car wash. Like, you are blasted and so many things shift, and there was a lot of integration and a lot of a recalibration that was very uncomfortable, kind of like a rebirth. Like, I felt very naked and raw and vulnerable coming out of that. Like, I was, starting from a clean slate with this new, like, I'd just been slipped out of the womb into this new dimension that was very different, just felt different. And because I'd been through so many changes on so many, energetic, physical, spiritual, emotional levels. So it's definitely a big commitment. I definitely don't recommend it unless it feels very, very aligned for you to do it. Would I do it again? I don't want to do it again. Let's put it that way. But if the time came up where I felt intuitively I was guided there and it was going to be supportive to me for whatever stage I am in my process, I'm open to that. But I would definitely say, only go and do it in a place that has come highly recommended from somebody who also experienced it with that person in that place and can, recommend that there's like a high level of integrity and care for the space. And I wouldn't tag along for the ride unless it feels really, really exciting for you to do that. And really, trust if it's coming up for you that there's something there. And as with anything, fully surrender to the process, fully trust. If you've decided to put yourself there, have a very, very clear intention to be supported in your highest good for whatever it is that will most support you to receive. Be very clear about your intention, as with anything. And feel free to ask me any questions. I'm happy that I followed through on the intuition to share this because it kept coming up for me. And obviously, some people out there need to hear this. So if you have heard this, or if you want to share your own experience and add to the conversation on this, because it is something that more and more people are talking about. And it is something that there isn't really that much information about, or there is becoming more and more. It's a really powerful tool. And I feel very honored to have had the experience that I have had. And looking back on it, I'm very grateful for all of the things that, all of the pieces that started to fall into place for me as a result of going through that process. Though obviously now, I continue to do that work on a smaller day-to-day basis, so that I'm really integrating and I'm always working to shift into more alignment, more better energy, more centeredness, more groundedness, more clarity on my intuition and my desires and whatever it is that I'm being called to step into in my work and in my life and in my relationships. And I think that was really just a powerful way to connect to the information that's available when we really deeply listen and we're willing to go inside and we're willing to go on those journeys and connect to whatever it is, tools that allow us to connect to our unconscious and our desires, and however it is that you explain what that phenomenon is. So I would love to hear your comments. I would love to hear your stories over on this video on my YouTube channel, which you can access at withsarahmac.com. And thank you so much for watching and have an amazing day. Bye. For more inspirational content, head over to my website withsarahmac.com and please support the show by liking, commenting, and subscribing.